On April 9, 1974, in the Moscow suburb town of Mytishchi, a boy was born who wanted to kill 64 people. According to the number of squares on a chessboard, when he was arrested in June 2006, investigators discovered a chessboard in his apartment. 63 squares on it were covered. They called him the Bitsa Maniac, the chessboard killer, the hunter of humans. On October 29, 2007, the Moscow City Court found him guilty of 49 murders and 3 attempted murders. He himself claimed there were more victims, 60, or maybe even 63. Today, I will tell you the story of Alexander Petushkin, the man who turned murder into a game, the man who said, "I was almost a god." Part 1. Childhood of a monster. His name was Sasha, Alexander Yuryevich Pichushkin, born on April 9, 1974, in Mytishchi. His father was an alcoholic and left the family when the boy wasn't even a year old. He was raised by his mother, Natalia and Muradovna, and his grandfather. In 1976, when Sasha turned 2 years old, the family moved to Moscow. Zyuzino district, Kersonskaya Street, building number 2. From their apartment to Bitsa Park was only a 6-minute walk. This park would become the place where the future maniac would spend most of his life, and where he would commit most of his crimes. At first, Sasha was an ordinary child, even very quiet and calm. Didn't misbehave, didn't fight, seemed like a modest boy. But then an accident happened that possibly changed everything. Alexander was playing on the playground, swinging on a swing set, and at some moment he fell. The swing came back and hit him on the head. Traumatic brain injury, damage to the frontal lobes of the brain. After this, the boy began having speech problems. He confused letters. Instead of sh, he wrote S. Instead of zh, he wrote Z. At school, teachers got annoyed. Classmates laughed. His mother decided to transfer him from a regular school to boarding school number 138 for children with speech disorders. This was the worst thing that could have happened to him. The boarding school gathered children with serious speech defects, mental disorders, from dysfunctional families. The atmosphere was cruel, bullying, humiliation. They called Alexander that retard. He was frail, physically weak, couldn't stand up for himself. It was there, in the boarding school, that the quiet boy began to withdraw into himself. He retreated into his inner world, where no one could penetrate. The only bright spot in his childhood was his grandfather. His grandfather effectively replaced Sasha's father. He instilled in him a love for sports, for drawing. He installed a pull-up bar in the closet, and the boy did pull-ups for hours, trying to become stronger. But most importantly, his grandfather taught him to play chess. They went together to Bitsa Park, where his grandfather had pensioner friends. The old men played chess on the benches, and soon they discovered that the boy, Sasha, was an outstanding chess player. He beat grown men. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt that he could dominate, that he could control the situation, that he was smarter than others. The chessboard became a whole world for him. 64 squares, black and white pieces, a game where everything depends only on you, where you decide who lives and who dies. But in 1988, something happened that Alexander perceived as a betrayal. His grandfather was over 70. He fell in love and moved in with his beloved. Sasha was told he had to return to his mother, that he was already big, that he should live with his family. Alexander was 14 years old, and this became a real trauma for him. The only person who understood him, to whom he mattered, had abandoned him. At least, that's how he perceived it. Returning to his mother, Sasha discovered that he now had a younger stepsister. His mother had remarried, and all her attention, all her love, now went to the new family. Alexander felt like a stranger in his own home. It was then that something inside him broke. Outwardly, he remained a quiet, obedient boy, but teachers began noticing oddities, fits of rage, sudden aggression. At 14, Alexander began attacking younger children, beat them, humiliated them. Once he grabbed a boy by the legs and threatened to throw him out of a window. But no one, neither his mother nor the teachers, took him to a psychologist. Everyone simply closed their eyes to it. After finishing boarding school, Alexander entered vocational school number 66 to specialize as a carpenter. Here he tried to become different, wanted to stand out, wore army-style American boots with high lacing, tried to court girls, but things didn't go further than awkward flirting. He began writing poetry, but his classmates only laughed at him. Then Alexander decided to win respect another way. He lent money to anyone who wanted it, but he took a receipt from the debtors, and the text of the receipt was this: "I am taking my life voluntarily because it is meaningless." He told them, "If you don't pay back the debt, I'll kill you and pass off your murder as suicide. I have your receipt after all." Everyone thought he was joking. His mother once bought him a moped. Sasha was happy and went for a ride. Returned an hour later, beaten, bloody, without the moped. Guys from a regular school took the vehicle from him and beat him up. Alexander couldn't fight back. This humiliated him, again and again. When it came time to go to the army, at the medical commission, a psychiatrist noticed something wrong. Alexander was sent for examination to the Koshchenko Psychiatric Hospital, now the Alexeyev Psychiatric Hospital. Diagnosis: psychopathy. Doctors warned his mother. The illness would progress. Her son needed serious treatment, needed observation. But his mother didn't believe it. She thought the doctors were just playing it safe, that everything was fine with her son. Alexander was declared unfit for military service. He returned home, and his mother noticed that after the hospital he became somewhat different. Something in him had cracked. He started drinking, got so drunk he couldn't climb the stairs, sat on the bench by the entrance waiting for his mother, cried, asked for forgiveness, then promised to quit, and got drunk again. He had no friends, only a cat and a dog. He worked as a handyman, a loader, a salesman. Colleagues were somewhat afraid of him. He was maniacally clean, constantly washed his hands. In the back room, he loved shredding cardboard boxes with a knife. And in 1992, an event occurred that changed him forever. Part 2. Birth of a Killer. April 1992. The trial of Andrei Chikatilo is thundering across the country. The Butcher of Rostov. 52 proven murders, the most terrible serial killer of the USSR. Alexander Petushkin was obsessed with this case. He collected all newspaper clippings about the trial, pasted them into a notebook, studied every detail. In newspaper photos, Chikatilo was dressed in a plaid shirt. Alexander asked his mother to buy him exactly the same one, and wore it constantly. When Chikatilo was sentenced to death by firing squad, Pichushkin was sitting with drinking buddies in the yard, and suddenly said, "And I will be the most dangerous criminal on the territory of the USSR. I will surpass Chikatilo." Everyone rolled with laughter. Sasha? Quiet, downtrodden Sasha? A killer? Yeah, right. But Alexander wasn't joking. It was then that he began planning. July 27, 1992. Alexander Pichushkin is 18 years old. He meets with his classmate from vocational school. His name is Mikyle Odichuk. He is also 18. Mikyle is the only person Alexander can call a friend. They studied together from 1989 to 1991, understood each other, or so it seemed. A few weeks ago, Alexander opened up to Mikyle, told him about his dream. He wants to kill 64 people, according to the number of squares on a chessboard, and suggested Mikyle do it together. At first, Odichuk played along. They even discussed methods, where best to do it. how to dispose of bodies. But gradually, Mikyle realized that Alexander was speaking seriously, that this was not a joke, not a fantasy. He didn't dare refuse directly, he was afraid, and continued playing the role. On July 27, 1992, Alexander suggested Mikyle go to Bitsa Park. "We'll find a place for our first deed," he said. Odichuk agreed, thought it was just talk again. They walked through the park. Alexander looked for a suitable place. He knew Bitsa Park like the back of his hand, knew every path, every manhole, every secluded spot. They stopped by a sewer collector. Petushkin took out a nylon rope he had prepared in advance, and in one moment threw it around Mikyle's neck. Odichuk didn't even have time to scream. Alexander strangled him methodically, calmly, looked into his eyes, saw life fading. This was his first murder, first victim, his friend. When Mikyle stopped moving, Alexander dragged the body to the manhole and threw it into the sewer. The flow speed in the Bitsa Park sewer system is 5 meters per second. The body was carried away instantly. It was never found. The next day, Odichuk's parents reported him missing. The police began questioning. It turned out that the last person to see Mikyle was Alexander Pichushkin. He was called for interrogation. Alexander was calm, confident. He lied convincingly, said they just walked in the park and went their separate ways. Mikyle went toward the metro, and he went home. There was no evidence. The body wasn't found. Alexander was released. Mikyle Odichuk's case went into the cold cases pile, unsolved crimes. Many years later at trial, Petushkin would say, "The first murder is like first love. It's impossible to forget." But after this first murder, something strange happened. Alexander went quiet, didn't continue. A year passed, 2, 5, 9 years. 9 years of silence. What was happening to him during this time? Alexander worked out, intensively developed his muscles. The skinny teenager turned into a sturdy man. He worked as a handyman, a loader, changed jobs, drank more and more. He lived with a cat and a dog. He loved the dog especially strongly. When the dog got old and its hind legs failed, Alexander cared for it like a child, carried it in his arms, fed it from his hands. When the dog died, Alexander buried it in Bitsa Park and mourned for a long time. Colleagues said they hadn't seen him so devastated even after his grandfather's death. The dog's grave. Remember this. He would use exactly this as a pretext. In 1996, Russia introduced a moratorium on the death penalty. No one was executed anymore. The maximum punishment became life imprisonment. And it was precisely after this, as investigators would later say, that Petushkin's interest in murder resumed. May 17, 2001. Almost 9 years had passed since the first murder. Alexander Petushkin is 27 years old. That day he was returning from the dentist, walking through the yard, and saw an acquaintance, Yevgeny Pronin, 52 years old, a local alcoholic nicknamed Kaif. That day, Pronin was celebrating his release. A few days ago, he was released from temporary detention. He sat there because in a drunken fight he stabbed his cohabitant with a knife. Pichushkin approached him. They started talking. Alexander suggested, "Let's go to the park for a drink, commemorate my dog. He's buried there." Pronin agreed. He still had vodka left. They arrived at Bitsa Park, sat on a bench, started drinking. Alexander drank little. He poured a lot for Pronin. When the man could barely stand on his feet, Petushkin said, "Let's go. I'll show you the dog's grave." They went deep into the park, to a sewer manhole. Pronin could barely stand, and at some moment Alexander simply pushed him into the manhole. Yevgeny Pronin fell into the icy water of the sewer collector, drowned, died. Alexander Pichushkin returned home calm. He realized, it works. No one saw anything. No one will suspect anything. Another alcoholic missing. There are hundreds of them. It was then that he took out his old childhood toy, the 15 puzzle. 15 numbered squares. After Pronin's murder, he glued the number 2 on one of the squares. Mikyle Odichuk was number 1. When the 15 squares ran out, he switched to a tear-off calendar. When space ran out there, too, he took the chessboard. 64 squares. After each murder, he covered a square. First with game checkers, when checkers ran out, with bottle caps. Caps from the very bottles he used to get his victims drunk before death. This was his game, his match, and he played by his own rules. Part 3. The Series. 2001. Over the next 7 months after Pronin's murder, Alexander Petushkin would kill 10 more people. All murders followed one scenario. Petushkin got acquainted with the victim. Most often these were elderly male alcoholics, homeless people, people without a fixed place of residence, those he considered unworthy of life, those no one would look for. He started a conversation, was polite, friendly, offered a drink, said, "Let's go to the park, commemorate my dog. He's buried there. I visit his grave every week." Or, "It's my birthday, and I have no one to celebrate with." Or, "I have plenty of booze at home, but the neighbors are annoying. Let's go to the park." Victims agreed, went with him to Bitsa Park. Usually this happened in the evening or at night. Alexander knew every meter of this park, knew where there were no cameras, where people didn't walk, where the sewer manholes were located. They sat on a bench, drank. Alexander drank little himself, but poured generously for the victim. When the person lost coordination, Petushkin suggested, "Let's go, I'll show you something interesting." Or simply said, "Let's go for a walk." Led the victim to a manhole and pushed, hard, abruptly. The person fell into the sewer collector. There was icy water, sewage. The fall height was several meters. Many broke bones, lost consciousness on impact. Those who remained conscious couldn't get out. Walls were slippery. The current was strong. The majority drowned, died from hypothermia, from injuries sustained. Alexander stood above and listened to the screams, listened to the death rattles, then closed the manhole and left. At home, he took out the chessboard and covered another square. May 23, 2001. Vyacheslav Klimov, 64 years old. June 22nd. Yuri, about 60 years old, surname could not be established. June 26th. Nikolai Tikhomirov, 65 years old. June 29th. Nikolai Filipov, 73 years old. July 2nd. Oleg Lvov, 49 years old. Pichushkin had known Oleg Lvov for 5 years. They were friends. This was the only murder about which Alexander later said, "It was a pity to kill him. He was a good person, but the square had to be filled." July 13th. Gennady Safonov, 61 years old, escaped from a narcology clinic and fell right into Petushkin's hands. July 14th. Sergei Pavlov, 44 years old. July 20th. Viktor Elistratov, 45 years old. July 21st. Viktor Volkov, 54 years old. And on July 26th, the first failure happened. Andrei Chikatilo, 22 years old. Petushkin tried to throw him into the manhole, but Andrei was young, sober. He started screaming, calling for help. 2 women were walking nearby and heard the screams. Petushkin, in panic, pushed Konovaltsev down and ran away. Andrei died. But the police finally paid attention. Surveillance was set up at the manhole. Alexander lay low. 6 months, not a single murder. In January 2002, he decided to try another method. January 18th, Vyacheslav, 39 years old, homeless. Petushkin lured him into an apartment building entrance on Kakovka Street. They went up to the 16th floor, drank on the stairwell landing, and Alexander threw him out the window. Vyacheslav fell from the 16th floor, crashed to death. But Petushkin didn't like the method. He said later, "The death screams didn't give me pleasure. Too loud, too fast." He returned to the manholes. February 23rd, 2002. Maria Viracheva, 20 years old, 5 months pregnant. She came to Moscow from Tatarstan, worked as a cosmetic seller, lived with her fiancé. That day they argued. Maria packed her things and decided to leave back home. Took several large bags and walked through Bitsa Park to the metro. It was faster. Pichushkin saw her, approached, offered to help carry her things for money. She agreed. They went deep into the park. Alexander hit her on the head with a hammer, pushed her into the manhole. But Maria Viracheva survived. She fell into the water but didn't lose consciousness. Found staples on the wall. With difficulty, bleeding, climbed out. 2 women found her, called an ambulance. In the hospital, a local police officer came to her and convinced her not to write a statement. "Say you fell yourself, that you tripped," he insisted. Maria was in shock, afraid, and agreed. In the summer, she gave birth to a daughter. Both are alive to this day. March 10th, 2002. Mikyle Lobov, 13 years old, ran away from an orphanage, wandered the streets. Pichushkin offered him 500 rubles for help, moving equipment. The boy agreed, followed him into the park. Alexander pushed him into the manhole, but Misha grabbed a staple, hung there, gathered all his strength and climbed out, ran away. A few days later, Petushkin saw him on the street, alive, whole. Got scared the boy would recognize him, but Misha just walked by, didn't recognize him. Then Alexander realized he needed to kill before throwing into the manhole, to be sure. In August 2002, he bought a rare item from a colleague, a shooting pen, a self-made pen gun. It took a small cartridge of 5.6 millimeter caliber. The shot was almost silent, but deadly at close range. August 24th. German Chervyakov, 43 years old. Former violinist, lived in a hut in the park. Petushkin shot him with the pen, 2 shots to the head. It worked. September 30th. Sergei Fyodorov. But here something went wrong. Petushkin shot twice. Didn't help. The man was still alive. Tried to reload, almost shot himself in the hand. Eventually finished the victim off with a nail puller. After this, he threw the pen into the pond. Decided needed something more reliable. In November 2002, Alexander Pichushkin came to a hardware store, chose a hammer for a long time, weighed it in his hand, checked the handle, chose a solid cast one weighing 800 grams. Killing people isn't driving males. You have to choose a reliable tool, he would say later. With this hammer, he would commit most of his murders, 1 blow to the head, from above, with all his strength. The victim fell, if still alive, another blow, and another, until quiet. Alexander worked in construction gloves. After the murder, went to a stream in the park, thoroughly washed the hammer, washed the gloves. At home, immediately washed his clothes. 2003. Alexander continues to kill, more confidently now, more cold-bloodedly. November 15th, 2003. Konstantin Polikarpov, 27 years old, Petushkin's neighbor in the building. They went to the park together, drank. Alexander hit him with the hammer. 4 blows to the head. Threw him into the manhole. But Konstantin's down jacket caught on the staples. He hung there, regained consciousness. With huge difficulty climbed out. He survived, but received severe traumatic brain injury, lost his memory, became disabled. A few days later, Petushkin saw him in the yard, approached, talked. Konstantin didn't recognize him, but Alexander got scared. He realized this was too close to home, too risky, and he lay low. Again, this time for 1 year and 7 months. But in 2005, something clicked in him. By this moment, he had killed more than 40 people. The chessboard was more than half full, but it wasn't enough for him. "I needed more emotions," he would say later. "In the well, I didn't see death, didn't see their faces, didn't hear their last words." From 2005, Pichushkin changed tactics. He stopped hiding bodies. Now, he killed right in the park, with a hammer blow to the head, and left the body in place. September 28, 2005. Yuri Kuznetsov, 46 years old. During conversation, fell asleep from intoxication. Alexander covered his mouth and nose, strangled him, left the body on the path. Police found him the next day, wrote it off as an accident. Heart attack against the background of alcohol intoxication. October 15, 2005. Nikolai Vorobyev, 31 years old. After hammer blows, tried to run away, screamed, called for help. Petushkin caught up and finished him off. A busy street was only a few dozen meters away. That's when the police realized a serial killer had appeared in the city. From November 2005, Petushkin develops a special signature. After the hammer blow, a large wound forms in the victim's skull. Air exits through it with a loud sound. This sound could attract witnesses. And Alexander starts sticking wooden sticks or glass vodka bottles into this wound. This plugs the hole and becomes his calling card. Police see such a signature for the first time and understand these are not just murders. This is a ritual. November-December 2005. 7 murders in 2 months. November 28th. Vladimir Dudukin, 73 years old. December 6th. Nikolai Koryagin, 72 years old. December 16th. Viktor Solovyov, 49 years old. His body was almost completely eaten by stray dogs. December 19th. Boris Grishin, 64 years old. December 26th. Alexander Lavochkin, 51 years old. His body was also eaten by dogs. Only the skull remained with a bottle in the wound. Stray dogs in Bitsa Park, having tasted human meat, no longer returned to regular food. They became man-eaters. Several of Petushkin's victims were found almost completely eaten, and the director of the Kuryanova wastewater treatment plant gave an interview. From 2001 to 2005, corpses were constantly found at our treatment facilities, 29 bodies during this time. I've been working for 30 years and never anything like this. We reported each one to the police, but cases weren't opened. 29 bodies. Almost all were Petushkin's victims. 2006, the final year of the hunt. By this moment, the press is already writing about the Bitsa Maniac. Moscow is in panic. People are afraid to go to the park. Police threw more than 200 operatives there, round-the-clock patrolling. Agents disguised as drunks, helicopter with thermal imager. Alexander's mother begs him every day not to go to the park. "There's a killer there, a maniac," she says. And Alexander sits and listens and smiles. He enjoys this fame, enjoys that the whole city talks about him, that he is feared, that he has become a legend. He avoids all traps, sees undercover agents from afar. "Too neat for bums," he says later. He reads newspapers, and one day sees a headline, "Bitsa Maniac caught." It was a fake story, a lie. Police hadn't caught anyone. But this enraged Alexander. Someone else wants to appropriate his fame? No, he won't allow this, and he immediately returns to killing. March 2006. Mahmoud Zholdoshev, 25 years old. Petushkin's colleague at the supermarket. Mahmoud had no housing. Alexander offered to spend the night at his place, drink on the way. Killed him with a hammer, hid the body. Was afraid if found, they'd come to the store. April 2006. Larissa Kuligina, 48 years old, one of 4 female victims of Pichushkin. And then, the last murder. June 13, 2006. Marina Muscalva, 36 years old, divorced, raising a son, Seryozha, works at the same supermarket as Pichushkin. It was she who once helped him get a job there. They were on good terms. Marina trusted him. That day, Alexander invited her for a walk in the park, late evening. Marina agreed. Before leaving, her phone broke. She left her son a note. Gone for a walk with Sasha Petushkin. If anything, here is his number. This was a fatal mistake. Alexander knew she left a note, but couldn't stop anymore. Emotions were greater than common sense. They arrived at the park, walked for a long time. Alexander noticed that all the manholes he used to throw victims into were now concreted shut. Police had done their work. He led Marina through the forest for an hour, 2. At some moment, stepped aside, thought, if she leaves, I won't chase. Let her live. But Marina stayed waiting, although she felt something was wrong. Alexander took out the hammer. Several blows to the head. Wheezing, brains, blood. As always, he would say later. Marina Muscalva became the 49th proven victim of the Bitsa Maniac. Part 4. Arrest and Trial. June 14, 2006. Marina Muscalva's son waits for his mother all night. She's not there. In the morning, he takes the note and goes to the police. Operatives pull metro camera recordings. Konkovo Station. On video, Marina and Alexander Petushkin enter the train car together. June 16, 2006. Early morning. A SWAT team bursts into the apartment on Kersonskaya Street. Alexander Petushkin is sleeping. They put handcuffs on him right in bed. Search. They find the chessboard. 63 squares are covered on it. 63 murders. 1 square remained to the goal. They find newspaper clippings about Chikatilo, photos from Bitsa Park, and the hammer. In the wounds of many victims, experts found tiny particles of plastic. They perfectly matched the material of Petushkin's hammer handle. For the first few days, he denied everything, but then asked to bring him a glass of vodka, drank it in one gulp, and began telling. He told with pleasure, in detail, with all specifics. Pointed to burial places on the map, named names, described methods, investigative experiments. Petushkin was taken to Bitsa Park dozens of times. He readily showed crime scenes, hit mannequins with a wooden hammer, demonstrating striking technique, demanded new boots so as not to dirty his own. I knew there were ambushes everywhere, stayed free, then didn't care and got caught, he said. Life is the most expensive thing a person has. Money, Mercedes cars, mansions don't even come close. I took the most expensive thing and didn't trade for trifles. Some died heroically, some cowardly. Before death, they called me the devil, cursed me in God's name. For me, murder was like food for you. I killed to live. The closer the person, the more pleasant it is to kill them. You get more emotion. I knew many of the killed, at least 20 people. Investigator Andrei Chikatilo, who led the case, told journalists, Pichushkin is an unusual serial killer. He is a hunter, a typical hunter. The trial began in August 2007. Charges: 52 episodes, 49 murders, and 3 attempted murders. But Petushkin tried to prove he killed more, 60 people, or 63. I knew the sentence would be guaranteed, he said. They didn't even want to listen that I had 60. Psychiatric examination. Alexander was declared of limited sanity. This means he is partially incapable of realizing the danger of his actions and controlling them. But this does not relieve him of responsibility. In the courtroom, Petushkin behaved defiantly, overconfidently, brazenly, threatened even his lawyer. You play tennis, and I waste people. October 24, 2007. The jury unanimously found Alexander Pichushkin guilty on all counts. October 25th. The defendant's final word. Petushkin stands up and delivers a speech that brings dead silence to the hall. For 500 days now I have been under arrest, and all these days a huge number of people are deciding my fate. Cops, investigators, judges, prosecutors, jurors, experts. Hundreds of people deciding the fate of one person. But I alone decided the fates of 63 people. No, perhaps 60. 3 can be discounted. I alone was for them prosecutor, juror, judge, and executioner. Fulfilled all your functions. I was almost a god. Feel the difference. October 29th, 2007. The Moscow City Court delivers the sentence. Life imprisonment. Special Regime Correctional Colony, Polar Owl, Karp Settlement, Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug. The first 15 years in solitary confinement. Pichushkin filed a cassation appeal, asked to soften the punishment from life to 25 years. February 14, 2008. The Supreme Court refused. Epilogue. Colony and Present. Polar Owl Colony, one of the harshest prisons in Russia, above the Arctic Circle. Winter lasts 9 months. Temperature drops to -50. Russia's most dangerous criminals sit here. Terrorists, serial killers, those who will never go free. At first, Petushkin was placed in a cell with Nurpashi Kulayev, one of the terrorists who seized the school in Beslin. Kulayev is a militant, a child killer. But in the cell with Petushkin, he experienced real horror. Alexander tormented him with his revelations, told details of murders, described how victims died, savored the details. One day, Petushkin looked at him and said, "Something about you I don't like." Kulayev, in panic, asked for a transfer to another cell. With other cellmates, it was the same story. Everyone was transferred. Eventually, Petushkin was placed in a solitary cell. He is there to this day. His only entertainment is television. Almost doesn't read books, refuses to work in prison production, cleans the cell with displeasure, complains of fatigue, constantly says he lacks the prescribed 8 hours of sleep. At night, he has nightmares, but not victims. He dreams of his dog, the very one he loved, whom he buried in Bitsa Park. He cannot forgive himself for not saving it. Several years after imprisonment, he met a woman from Khanty-Mansisk through correspondence, Natalia. They exchanged letters. Petushkin proposed to her. A wedding in the colony is possible by law. According to one version, relatives of Petushkin's victims learned about this and flooded the colony with protesting letters. According to another, Natalia simply changed her mind. The wedding did not take place. Alexander's mother burned all his photos and belongings after his arrest, but didn't abandon her son. She writes him letters, sends packages, and Alexander Petushkin himself hasn't changed. He is still convinced he was right. Quotes from his interviews in the colony. Of the pluses, I am very punctual. And minuses? What minuses? Well, probably too kind. It's in your value system that I'm evil, but actually, evil is you. If they released me now, first thing I'd do is kill a couple of people to relieve stress, rape a woman and drink vodka, and then however the cards fall. NTV journalists, I will return to Bitsa Park. My hand remembers the hammer well. If they hadn't caught me, I never would have stopped, never. Saved many lives by catching me. In April 2025, the Federal Penitentiary Service reported, Alexander Petushkin is ready to give confessions for another 11 murders. Men and women. Northern Batovo District, Moscow. Crimes that are still listed as unsolved. If this is true, it means he really killed 60 people, just as he said. Today, Alexander Pichushkin is 51 years old. He is serving a life sentence in the Polar Owl Colony. In a solitary cell measuring 8 square meters. Walks 1 hour a day in a concrete courtyard under the open sky. Officially proven, 49 murders and 3 attempted murders. Crime period, 1992 to 2006. 14 years of hunting. 3 survived. Maria Vyatacheva, who gave birth to a daughter. Mikyle Odichuk, who is now in his 30s. And Konstantin Polikarpov, who lost his memory and lives as an invalid. On the chessboard found during the search, 63 squares were covered. 1 remained to the goal. Just 1. Bitsa Park today is a regular recreation place for Muscovites. Children walk there. Sports are played. Elderly people play chess on those very benches where once little Sasha beat his grandfather's friends. But the sewer manholes in the park are now welded shut tight. On some trees hang signs, "Here was found a victim of a serial killer." Unofficial monuments. And Alexander Pichushkin once said, Bitsa Forest is intended for 2 things, for murder and for love. 49 proven victims, possibly 60. Life imprisonment, without the right to life. This is the story of the Bitsa Maniac, the story of a man who played chess with human lives and lost. This was the story of Alexander Pichushkin, the Bitsa Maniac. 49 proven victims, life imprisonment. The man who turned murder into a chess match lost his last game. If this story touched you, subscribe to the Red Archive channel. Hear only verified facts about the loudest crimes of Russia and the world. No censorship, no speculation. Click the bell so as not to miss new episodes. Every week, a new story that will make you think. Like and write in the comments which case you want to hear about next. Take care of yourselves. Until we meet again.